look, Lisa's scraping the bottom of the barrel, getting me to open up and acknowledge everyone here this evening. Tērā, tērā. So it's only right from a Māori perspective that I respond to her request and acknowledge Puna hapu, puna iwi ki kaihuri, and of course the hapuri, the community of Whainaro, of Raglan. Nō reira tēnei ka mihi ake, ki ko tātou kīngi a kīngi tū heitia, e noho mai nā iaia ki runa i tā kara o tōna āhuratanga. Kai a rātou ka i roto i tōna porotia te whare o te kāhui ariki, ore te pō, ore te ao i te pō, ore, maui e, tātou ki. Just acknowledge the Lord household of Ki Heitia and all those that reside within the circle of the kāhui ariki. Nō reira, kei te mea tu ki a koutou hoki, te hāpuri o Whainaro. And of course, acknowledge you, the community of Raglan, I haramai ki konei ki tēnei kaupapa, i tēnei pō, that have come tonight to join us in this really important kaupapa for you and your community. E kore e mutu i ngā mihi ki a rātou nā ko hipa ki tō poro karani. Mai nā marae kai kone, kai Whainaro, kia tera pātiki, o mō tako ako poi hākena. And it goes without saying, Lisa, that I also must acknowledge our peoples here of Whainaro, mō tako, Ngāti Mahana, Ngāti Tahina, awaiake. So greetings and acknowledgements to you all. Nō reira, ka rea hia ki te tōro ake te kaupapa. I don't want to proceed our proceedings this evening. This kaupapa is about you. And this kaupapa here, the Raglan Treatment Plant, is a number of us, and I'm sure we'll do our introductions here. But in terms of the kaupapa itself, we acknowledge the kaupapa, we acknowledge our people that have arrived here this evening, we acknowledge those that are on local boards, we acknowledge those that hold seats as councillors, and of course, as they serve you, the community. So nō reira, nā tātou atua katoa hei manaki hei tiaki a tātou, kia pua wai nā kōrero a te pōne. May all our gods take care of us, and may our aims and objectives this evening come to fruition. Nō reira, tēnā huta, au ie, hui ie. Tāre, kia ora. Tēnā.
Kia ora koutou. On behalf of myself, my name is Lisa Thompson. I'm the local councillor for Waikato District Council for the Whainaro Raglan Ward. And I'm proud to say I grew up here. We have our family farm on the southern side of Karioi, where I grew up with my 12 older brothers and sisters. And I whakapapa here to Raglan as well, through Ngāti Mahana Haurua. So I stand here really proudly as a community member, and also very humbled for the circumstances that have taken place just recently that have impacted on many of us, well, all of our community actually, from hapu to whānau to our community. And I really want to acknowledge that and how passionate you all feel about our moana, about our environment and this place that we are really lucky and privileged to call home in the rohe of Whainaro. So I warmly welcome you on behalf of the Whainaro Raglan Community Board and on behalf of Council, our water care staff and our partners. And I really want to acknowledge you all. And with the number of our staff that we have this evening and also my fellow councillors that have come here to listen and to support the community. It shows the level of importance that we've placed on this and that we have done over the last 4 years of the work that we've been doing in the background, which you will learn about. So once again, I warmly welcome you here. I'll hand over to Dennis just shortly, but I would like to run through some housekeeping before we start. We've been very fortunate to have Ray Dickro's here, who's going to be filming tonight, and that's really because there are lots of people who were unable to make it tonight, so we want it to be as transparent so people can listen to the kōrero that's taking place this evening, and they'll be able to watch again. So will you, if there are other things that you need clarified. We've got If there's an event of an emergency, obviously there's an exit just where you've come in, or alternatively at the back here. And for those of you who don't know where the toilets are, they're just through here as well. And feel free to have a biscuit or a cup of tea as well. Refreshments are there. And if we do need to evacuate, we will meet in the grass area between the church and the hall. So once again, thank you for being here. We're sorry that there aren't that many seats. We're hoping to get the town hall, but it's a Thursday evening, so it's used for dance. So hence why we're here in this beautiful whare and on this beautiful evening. So once again, we welcome you once, we welcome you twice, we welcome you twice. So I'll hand over to Dennis. If you don't know Dennis, he's the chair of the community board, of the Raglan Community Board, and we've also got Chris Rayner, who's here as well, and he's done a lot of work in the Three Water space as well over his tenure on the board. So kia ora everyone, and I'll hand over to Dennis.
Thanks, Lisa. Kia ora everyone. We have quite a few people here tonight, and I'll just firstly we've got David White, Chairman of Water Care Governance Board, Garth Dibley and Richard from Water Care Governance Board, plus Matthew and Nikita. We also have from Council Gavin Iron, on my right here, who's Chief Executive, and Megan May, who I think is now General Manager Service Delivery, and several other members, as Lisa alluded to. We've got several of the councillors here today as well. So thank you. We also have Chantel and Patrick from Waikato Regional Council, who won't be speaking, but if there's questions that are relevant to them, they are more than happy to take questions as well. So the agenda for tonight will be that David will speak. Gavin's going to speak first, then David will speak, and then Matthew will give us a breakdown of, or a rundown of what's happened, what's planned for the future, and developments that are going on in the wastewater space. I guess I know there's some people that are pretty interested in the project and various things. Just like to say that, while the speakers are speaking, if everyone can be courteous and respect the speakers, there will be a chance at the end for questions. We've allowed a lot of time for questions, so you all will get the opportunity to answer questions should you have questions. And if we can hold questions to the end, because I think particularly in Matthew's presentation, he may answer some of the questions that you've got. He also may create other questions that you want to ask as well. So if we can hold questions to the end, I would appreciate that. So thank you all, and I'll hand over to Gavin.
Thank you, Dennis. Evening, everyone. I'd like to say it's great to see you, but I think probably from everyone's perspective, we'd all prefer not to be here. But we have a situation that has happened that we want to deal with. We have a situation that, as council, we want to front up to and have an honest conversation about. And at the end of the day, Matt will explain to you the process and exactly what happens. But what I wanted to say was, regardless of what happens, ultimately council is the consent holder, so we are responsible for the actions and what took place. So I just want to be absolutely clear on that. It's not something we're proud of at all. In fact, it's something we're very disappointed about and obviously do not want to see happen again. But we're here because it has happened, and we need to front up, and we need to give you the opportunity to understand what took place, and also if you have questions, which I'm sure you will, to have those questions answered as well. So that's really why I'm here. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. So now I'll hand over to David, who's chair of our Waters Governance Board.
Thanks very much, Gavin. Dennis and councillors and everyone. I'll just say a few words. Really, it's just to introduce myself, to introduce the board. The board, and Garth's here equally as one of the other directors on that board. Our role is to manage the contract on behalf of the council with water care services. Why am I here tonight? It's simply to listen to the concern. We are extremely disappointed with what has happened. So our function here tonight is to listen, to hear that concern, and most importantly, listen to the assurances that are going to be given around what we are doing to ensure it does not happen again. So, Dennis, thanks.
Thanks, David. Okay, I'll get Matt to run through his presentation. So if you can just be with us, and once Matt gets there, we'll open up for questions.
Evening, everyone. So I'm Matthew Tell from the Operations Manager for the Water Care contract to the Waikato. The reason I'm here today is obviously we deliver 3 water services across the district, and we're here to just discuss the incidents that happened over the last 3 weeks and just give a kind of an overview of what's happened, why it's happened, what we've done about it, and what we're doing going forward. We're also going to really briefly touch on the plant itself and what's going to happen in the future, just to give some background on that as well. But as we said, there's a wee bit in here, and I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible so we can get to questions. If you do have anything urgent, then great, but otherwise we may answer the questions you have and then we can talk at the end. So just to give you an overview, I thought first of how the plant works and what it does. So really briefly, is this volume all right? I don't know. They said put it to your chin and I'm burning the best of that. Okay, so some of you may know, some of you may not. This is essentially a aeration pond plant. So a fairly simple technology. It's been around for about 30, 40 years. A lot of the plants around the country are of this style at the moment, but you'll probably know most of them are now being replaced with newer technology, as we're proposing to do here as well. How the plant essentially works is the wastewater comes into the plant. It reaches this point, which is called a screen. That screen takes out all these solids like plastics and things that really just shouldn't be put down the drain. We always talk about the 3 Ps, pee, paper, poo. Everything else has to be taken out. At that point, it then goes into the first 2 ponds. The stream gets split, and this is the first level of treatment, and then it goes into the second level of treatment, which is the second set of ponds. Then it enters this final pond, and then finally goes through UV and is discharged out from the estuary, the entrance to the harbour. So this process takes around 20 days, 20 to 25 days from the point that the wastewater enters to the point that the treated effluent leaves the plant. So just to give you an idea of how that works, as I said, it goes through the screen initially. We have the first set of treatment, which is the primary treatment, pond 1. It has aquamats and aeration, which is pipes along the bottom to feed the bugs and to ensure that they're doing what they need to do to treat the wastewater. Then that effluent travels to the second. So the solids that comes in, I know this isn't the best topic to talk about solids, sorry, but solids is a word we have to use. So the solids drop to the bottom of the pond. They then go to the second pond, and that process is essentially repeated with more treated effluent, and then enters the final pond, which really does little other than just holds it before it discharges. So the discharge from the plant is really based on the volume of what wastewater is entering the plant. So you'll remember about 1.5 years ago, unfortunately, with the really heavy rainfall and everything that happened, there was also a discharge, which was a plant discharge, because the plant couldn't keep up with the volume of treatment of wastewater that was coming into it. And we communicated that to the community. Now, in that situation, the consent allows for that because that's based on volume and the risk of the plant failing. So any of the dams associated with the plants being overtopped could result in a much worse environmental impact of actually untreated wastewater entering the environment. So we have to ensure that never happens, and that means discharging the treated effluent on the incoming tide. Now that's happened very rarely, and still the intention that it should never happen if we can not do that. The plant itself, as I said, is not modern technology. It's quite an old technology, and it's fairly simple. You can see one of the challenges that we have with the plant is it was consented in 2005 for a 15-year period, and through that time, the plant has struggled to keep up with treatment and the requirements it has on it. So you can see as of kind of 2017 and before, the plant was struggling to achieve compliance with what it was doing. So that was primarily around suspended solids and the nature of the plant process. Now, over the last 2 years, we had put in place some improvements in that, but what we'll probably find this year was a step back again because of the heavy rainfall we had in the 12-month period between 22 and 23. So what effectively we're here to talk about today? Well, it's the tidal discharge. Now, under the consent, we are approved to discharge on the outgoing tide. Now that seems fairly logical, obviously, that it takes the treated effluent out into the ocean, not into the harbour, for it then to leave again. So that's how the consent is designed, and that's how the plant operates. Just to give you an idea of how that aspect of the plant operation works, the plant programming says what day is it, what month is it, what year, what's the time, and what's the tidal condition, i.e. is it the ingoing or outgoing tide. And based on those pieces of information, the plant will either discharge or it won't. So just as an example, that would be on the 10th of October, the 23rd, it's 7:28, it's an outgoing tide, so the plant will discharge. So how that works is what's called a PLC, so it's a programming logic that goes into the plant, because the plants are automated. We don't have people there turning switches. We're a long way beyond that now, thankfully. We have to program the plant so it knows what to do, and also to tell us when it's not doing what it's meant to do. So in this situation, we put in 3 years worth of programming, which tells the plant when to discharge and when not to discharge. So I'll come to this later. Then in January 21, 3 years worth of programming was loaded into the system. So a correct sequence for this would be, and because this is programming, so it's not do, don't, it's ones and zeros. So it says 1 means discharge, 0 means don't discharge. So a normal sequence you'd expect to see is 1 0 1 0 1 0, and we'll just keep going that way forever. So the recent event was where that sequence was broken. So how did that happen? So the first step was, as I said, in the 30. So from January 22, we had to load 3 years worth of programming to tell the system what to do over that 3-year period, and that was through to the 31st of December 24. That programming was loaded and unfortunately operated correctly for 21 months because it was loaded correctly, and then for these recent events, the errors that were in that programming, which we've identified as human error, unfortunately, came to the fore. So that error occurred 3 times. Now, the first time, it did not have an impact. So essentially, when the plant was meant to discharge, it didn't discharge. Now, that was on daylight saving. So when the team investigated and identified that it hadn't discharged, the outcome of that investigation was the belief that it was due to daylight savings, because that can affect the programming. Ultimately, we know that wasn't correct, unfortunately. On the 10th of October, we experienced the first instance of the plant discharging on the incoming tide. Now, disappointing though this is, the community was great and they notified us within 2 discharges. So the first one was first thing in the morning, and the second one was in the later afternoon. And that second event, we were notified about it and we were able to get onto it. Now, why is that important? Because the system believed it was doing the right thing. So there was nothing about the system that said I'm doing the wrong thing, because what had effectively happened is the system had said 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 1. So it had switched. So it started to discharge when it was not meant to be, and it wasn't discharging when it was. So that occurred, and that resulted in 3 out of cycle discharges. So what happened with that is the first 2 were identified. The team tried to remotely manage the discharge, and unfortunately we identified another programming error that had to be rectified. So that's why there was a 3rd discharge, unfortunately. The second instance, so from that point the team began the investigation to understand exactly what had happened. We worked with the contractor who does the programming for us, because it is quite specialised work. We tried to get into the programming and understand why the system didn't do exactly what we intended for it to do. We identified the issue quite quickly, thankfully, and that was essentially, as I showed you, a switching of the sequence, because what happens is when the programmers were putting in 3 years worth of programming, it's programming. I don't understand it, I'll be perfectly honest. It's lots of ones and zeros and lots of information. And unfortunately, it's quite a manual way this PLC was operating. And so what essentially happened is, as the person was programming, there was a cut and paste element of just continuing that programming to get to the 3 year. And what happened while they were doing that is they incorrectly cut and pasted, and that's where the switch resulted. As I said, for 21 months, the program operated exactly as it should have. And then that cutting and pasting occurred. So as I said, that's where the human error aspect of it came into. There is another part of this investigation that highlighted that more validation is required of that programming, just to ensure that when these programs are loaded in, they're doing exactly what we intended them to do. So at the point that in both of those events, we immediately put out signs and communication to make sure that we've been extremely transparent with the community and they understand what's happened. It's not intended. We notify the community as soon as we become aware of things. So I know there's been a number of questions about why wasn't it immediate. Well, we didn't know, as an example, in the first instance when the first event occurred. It was actually through the community notifying us the plant wasn't doing what we understood it was doing, that we were able to investigate and fix that problem. The second event that occurred on the 26th of October, so once the team became aware of the issue, they worked with our contractor and we went in there and we corrected all the issues out to the end of October to make sure that that we had time to then get in and really correct the rest of the programming out to the 31st of December 24. Now this is the whole thing was obviously exceptionally disappointing for us. The team were extremely passionate and extremely care about what we do, otherwise we wouldn't be doing it, so we're all very disappointed. But essentially a single date, which was the 26th of October, was missed in that check. And that's where the second event occurred. So at that event, that's where there was the discharge first thing in the morning, and then one later in the day. And through the checks and balances that the team had put in place to make sure the plant was operating correctly, when they came in the next day, they identified that issue, immediately escalated it, and we notified the community that it had happened again. Obviously exceptionally disappointed about that. So throughout this event, we've taken samples from within the harbour to understand the impact of it. We work really closely with the regional council. We notify themselves as well as the community when things like this happen, thankfully not too often, but we work really closely with them around making sure we understand the impact of the events and what's happened, and how quickly or not we can communicate to the community that everything's back to how it should be. So just to give an overview of how that works. So what that does is that's where we have sampling that we do in certain parts around the harbour just to assess the impact of the O. And what we're testing for is intercoccal, which is really a kind of a coastal version of a coli. So it's a sample. It's a measurement of the fecal indicator bacteria from within the ocean, from within we were testing. So just to give you an idea of how that works, because under our consent, we're generally working towards to be below 35 parts per 100 mils. And the plant on a normal basis is generally producing 1.6. So significantly below any kind of measure we had. And just as an example of just how well, recognising it is an older plant, the plant does is we've had 3 examples, I think, which are over 20 CFUs since 2021, and none of them exceeding 31. So overall, the plant is, in this way, what's being discharged from the plant is certainly should be on the outgoing tide, but it has a minimal impact on the environment due to the treatment. That's why we do the treatment. But just to give you an indication of what that means, so if we're operating to try to keep it focused on a maximum of 35, which we don't get anywhere near, 140 is a level where all recreational facilities and everything is operating as normally. When you go between 140 and 280, that's where you need to be closely monitoring what's happening and trying to identify why there's an issue in the environment. And then above 280, that's at the point where you're saying there should be any swimming, there should be any engagement with the environment until the problem's solved. So where do we take our samples from? So we take our samples from 5 locations. So we test at the point of what's coming out of the treatment plant. So as I mentioned before, it goes through the ponds, and the last part of the treatment is UV treatment. So that UV treatment is to kill off any bacteria that's left in the final effluent before it's entered into the receiving environment. And as you can see here, the result is generally 1.6 at that point. So that's the point here. The wastewater treated effluent is then discharged to the discharge point. And then in this example, we sample in 4 different locations around the harbour, just so we can understand the impact of what's occurred. The results for that, you can see over here on the left. So for the Wainumu beach, you can see that the majority of the samples were taken. We're certainly below the 35, except for this one exception here. But on the whole, we're within the realms of where we would expect them to see, especially recognising that what's actually coming out from the treatment plant is 1.6. So there is always going to be environmental impacts on anything, and naturally occurring aspects to that. As you come to the point, you can see that the results start to dip. And also this event is 2 days after the first event, 3 days after the first event, and 5 days after the first event. And then for the second event, this is the day after the second event, the day after that, and then the 4 days essentially from it. So we're more than happy to provide this presentation for everybody to have a look at in detail later on. Now, one of the things this has highlighted around the test results is some anomalies. So what we are looking for is to try and understand when the effluent, treated effluent is discharged here, what's the impact as that treated effluent enters the harbour prior to it being flushed back out in the next tidal. So what we'd be looking for is a steadily decreasing impact as it goes through the harbour, and then as it comes back out, seeing the results change over time. That's not really what we see with this. So what we see is, if we look at this, we find that the results aren't really that impacted in this area, but on by the boat ramp and behind the museum area, we did get some quite significant readings. Now, we don't believe that's associated with the discharge. What we do believe is there's something else happening in the environment that we need to understand and work with the regional council on, because there's nothing to indicate, as you can see here, the day before and the day before to then result in quite large readings. It doesn't make sense. Now, these are Sundays, so they are on the weekend. The other aspect we've identified is there was rainfall on those days as well. So there are a number of aspects that could contribute to this. At this stage, it's just something that needs to be investigated and looked into. So how did we fix the issue? So as I said, we identified the issue very quickly. So an investigation was carried out. The programming issue was identified quickly. We then went into the process of validating the data. Unfortunately, the second human error, which is that single date was missed on the 26th of October, occurred. Again, very disappointing. But what the team has done since then is validated the rest of the data out to the 1st of December. We've had multiple eyes checking that just to make sure it's exactly right, and then validating what's been put into the system. It's not a good validation process at the moment. It is open to error, and that's why we're having multiple people validate it and check it. It is something that we'll be looking to improve. So the validation process for the future, as I said, are going to improve. We're going to look at other ways to pull that data out and actually do more appropriate check and balances over it, rather than just having to visually check it and then revalidate it once it's in the system. But essentially, the validation points are at the point that we confirm the data. So again, it's 3 years worth of tidal data and the discharge and not discharge aspects. It's the point at which we load the data, so making sure the correct data is loaded. We work with the contractor to do that. And then the final check is validating what's in the system and making sure it's saying exactly what we expected it to say. So what have we done to prevent this in the future, which is obviously a massive concern for us, to make sure that this never, I'd love to say never, but that we've put every precaution in place to ensure this should not happen again in the future. So we've created 3 new alarms within the system. So just taking you through those briefly, you can see down here, this is an alarm that shows what the next 5 tidal discharges are due to do. And if there is a high, low, 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 at that point it will trigger an alarm, which will notify the team so that they investigate and find out why the sequence isn't what we expect it to be. We've also created a second alarm here, which indicates that if the pumps are due to discharge within too short a time frame, because obviously we're working to tide times here, that will trigger another alarm to say we've got another pump sequence planned, but it's too early, it shouldn't be happening. And then the final one is to say it's been too long since we had a pump sequence happen, because obviously that can be another trigger. That's what happened in the first event, where it didn't discharge and then possibly would have discharged at the wrong time if we had caught that one. So all of the purpose of all these alarms is to prevent this occurring again before it happens. As I've said, we've improved the validation around the data entry and post-loading just to ensure that we double check and triple check all this information at the start before it goes into the system and once it's in the system. We've created functional descriptions, so without going into detail of plant, I just have what's called an operating manual, so O&M manual, so it's operation and maintenance. And each aspect of the plant has its own manual and its own, and down at the level of what we call a PLC, a program system, it's called a functional description. Unfortunately, this particular plant didn't have a functional description for this particular program, so we're creating those as we go, and clearly, obviously, making sure that's in place so that when we do ask a programmer or somebody to get involved with doing programming, they understand exactly what the intention and the requirement from us is for the operation of the plant and can validate those activities. One of the other checks and balances we're going to do, so I'm looking at these two here, is we'll also be coming back to Lisa and to Dennis to show the validation of the programming that we've done over the next few months until everyone's comfortable that we have addressed this issue to everyone's satisfaction, and they can communicate and work with us to let the community know that the correct checks and balances are in place going forward. So the last thing I wanted to run over was just what's the future for Raglan. Now, some of you will be involved in coming to our meetings to talk about the future for the plant and for the discharge. So as I've highlighted, the current plant has its limitations, and as you all know, Raglan is growing, so it's not suitable for what needs to happen next and for the new consent that the plant needs. So that plant will be replaced. We've just had confirmation of the approval for the funding for that, so that's gone through a tendering process, so we identify how much the new plant is going to cost, which is a significant investment in the area. We've also had approval there from the council and all the approvals required to make sure that we can progress. Where we're at with that, the treatment plant process is in its final stages of tender, so we've gone out to the market, which means we are a little bit, we have to be very cautious about what we say about that because it's a closed process. But essentially, we're just prior to the awarding process, so that's we're hoping to have that completed in the next month. Once that's done, we then get on with the building. So it takes a long time, unfortunately, to get to that building, but this has been a process that we triggered a long time ago, recognising these plants needed to be replaced. The discharge option is slightly different. We've been working with the community for 4 or 5 years now, around what needs to happen with this particular discharge and what happens. And we've taken on board the community's preference that this isn't the option that they want. There are other ways of managing the discharge of treatment from a waste, treated effluent from a waste. Some of the options are to land, so they go to land and soak through the land and then discharge naturally into the environment. There's other options of discharging out further into the ocean, and then obviously the existing option that exists here. So the decisions around what that will be have not been made. That's the engagement that we're having with the community. The next session for that is on the 14th of December. They happen monthly, just to take the community through what we're doing and how that's planning, and make sure that the option that we put in front of the community and ultimately the council is what everyone wants. Now, there's always cost implications for those options, but that's the first thing is to identify what the solution is. Lastly, we really regret this happening. I understand the community feeling. It's as I said, we're very proud of what we do. It's important to us that we do this job well and that we deliver the service that the community expects. And on this occasion, we haven't done that. And for that, I apologise. We really appreciate your understanding and working with us as we've gone through this process to ensure that we understand what's happened, why it happened, and how we avoid it in the future. So happy to take any questions from there.
Thanks, Matt. Just to probably clarify, that next meeting is an online meeting.
Yes,
Yeah. So the meeting Matt's talking on, and they are monthly. So if you want contacts for that, get hold of Chris and myself or Lisa. We can provide you the contact for that and ensure an invitation sent out to you. So at this stage, we're open for questions. Lisa's got a microphone. She'll run around for me. If you've got any questions. So questions.
Do you just want to mention that all of our meetings have been recorded and are available on YouTube and the council website?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. What Chris is saying, that all the previous meetings that Water Care have run on the new wastewater system have been recorded, and they are all online. So you can actually go back and look at them. There's a lot of information in there of what's been happening over the last 3 or 4 years, and it is very informative. Probably Chris, as far as the community board's the sort of guy that's kept his finger on the pulse as far as we can send someone into, for instance. So yeah, if you've got questions on that, feel free to ask Chris too. I'll volunteer on my behalf. Okay, we'll take questions at this stage.
Just interested in the time frame that you say you're going to start building soon, and we're still in. Just interested in the time frames. If you're saying you're going to start building soon, and we're still talking about how we can discharge, where it will be, and how much that will cost, what are we talking about? 5 years, 6 years?
No, it's a great question. So what we've done is, because of the nature of the plant and the discharge, normally what you would do is you would do both together. You would do them because normally the consent requirements is what drive the plant requirements. In this case, the technology that we're proposing, which is what we've done in Miramar and we're currently doing in Te Kaupara, is current technology. It's something that will be in place for a very, very long time. So whilst we've recommended, due to the non-compliances, that we need to move forward with the plant, it's not what we would normally do. The expectation at the moment is that a build for this type of plant is around 18 months. And so, as I said, we're hoping to have that bid and that approval going through in the next month or two. So you add 18 months to that and you can get an idea. So we're talking around June 25. So that's for the plant. The discharge, obviously, we're still going through that consultation and that process. So I don't have a time frame for that.
Would the new plant be in exactly the same place?
At this stage, yes, it is. It's going to be in the same location footprint of the existing plant. It's a much smaller plant. It's a much more compact plant. But it's within the same area. At the moment, as you saw at the start, all the pipes within the area are directed to that plant. So ideally, what we'd be doing is continuing with the existing network and just putting a plant at the end to do the treatment.
Yeah, Kia ora. 2 questions, if I may. If you've got 3 years of dates and data pre-arranged, can we have those dates so that we know there's a discharge planned on an outgoing job as a community?
We're happy to do that. So just as an example, there will be a discharge on every outgoing time. So the plant is constantly discharging. As you can imagine, having a tidal discharge is actually a constraint for the plant. So most plants are discharging constantly. That's how they work. This particular plant can't do it, so it is constrained by the tides, which is fine. That's what the consent allows. So just so you know, on every outgoing tide, there will be a discharge. Now, the scale of that discharge will vary. It depends on how much effluent we've received and how much we've treated. And so we treat what's there to be discharged. We discharge what's there to be discharged, no more. But it will be on every discharge, on outgoing tides.
And secondly, fair to assume if something like this happened and it was a private entity that was responsible, they'd be under the fire alarm. What fire alarm are you guys under, and you being held accountable by a bigger entity than yourself?
We're held accountable by you. We're held accountable by the council and by our board. So, as I said, from our perspective in Watercare, this is what we do, and we take great pride in what we do, and we're very disappointed by the security. So, Dennis,
I'll just get Matthew to comment as well. Matthew's from Waikato Regional Council, and they are investigating the. Sorry, Patrick. Investigating.
Yeah, we go under a false name. But, yeah, so good evening, everyone. I'm from the Waikato Regional Council. So just to explain the difference between Waikato District.
Yeah, you might be agreeing. Just actually point more important
Sure.
information about this.
Sorry about that.
Just touch it.
So just to explain the difference, it's unhelpful with the names. There's a Waikato District Council, Waikato Regional Council. Just to explain, they're quite different, separate entities, got different roles. Chantel and myself, our role in that is that we're the environmental regulator, if you like. So it's for us to hold the likes of Waikato District Council accountable for any unauthorised discharges into the environment. So, though they've investigated, Waikato District Council have looked at this themselves, and I think it sounds very thorough. It's been very helpful for us hearing this tonight. We'll be looking at that independently, and just checking all of that information. At the end of the day, on the face of it, these look like unauthorised discharges into the environment. So what does that mean? Like, what does that mean in respect of should there be some sort of accountability? Should there be something punitive happen? Or is it about planning for the future? So those are the things that we have to work through, and we work through that kind of thing all the time with lots of different agencies and entities and businesses, as you say, businesses that do discharge into the environment. So that's our role in this. So, but yeah,
I think
happy to answer any questions about that.
So Patrick, we have been treated no differently to any private enterprise.
But that's right. So some people have been here for a while will remember that actually the Waikato District Council has actually been prosecuted for unauthorised discharges from the plant. That would be some years ago now. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, so almost a decade ago now. We unfortunately were in a position where we have investigated and prosecuted other territorial authorities around the wider region. So yeah, well, we can talk to each other. But there's also this professional relationship that we need to work through. But we regulate these people just like we do in business. Thanks.
Will those findings be public?
They absolutely can be. Yes, absolutely can be.
So just to give you an idea, so we have already provided a report for the first event, and we're in the process of putting together the report for the second event for the regional council. So as Patrick said, we work really closely. We're exceptionally transparent about what's happened. That's part of why we're here today, and making sure that we're clear on what happened, why it happened, and what we're doing to ensure it doesn't happen again.
I feel like doing karaoke actually. Just wondering what the computerized definition of outgoing tide is. Like for me, is it the very peak of high tide and then it's going to start flashing? Like when does it flash? Was it just before the outgoing tide?
Yeah, so generally it's 30 minutes to an hour after the tide change, and then 30 to an hour before the tide switches back. So it's never start of tide to end of tide. That's how the programming operates. So it discharges as long as it needs to, as long as it can within that time frame. And then at that point, no matter what, it shuts down.
Okay. And my other question around kind of like accountability, but when there is a discharge, or is there anything that's already implemented that counteracts what's going on in the harbour? Like whether it be planting, what is it that we're doing already to just counteract what's happening out there, any of the pollution?
It's a great question. I'm not sure I have an answer for it today, and if I don't have an answer, we will come back with an answer on anything I can. So the intent of what we do is operate the plant within the consent allowances that we have to ensure that we're meeting all our conditions and we're discharging as agreed. We don't generally get involved in the wider harbour and how it's operating, obviously, except for ensuring that we don't do unfortunately what we've done here. So I can check with the team if there's anything further we do. We work obviously with stormwater and other activities, but not so much for the wastewater treatment aspect of it.
It might be like a nice thank you for just trying to go to cool. One other thing I just want to float out. For me, I've got them on. So I've got tamariki that are in the water and doing wakaama. For me, I'm no scientist, but I feel that where the boat ramp is at Kupua, it's a lot more shallower. Is there any way, like it might, me logically thinking that it will just build up there, like you said that the numbers were high there, and it's like, does it really need to be investigated, or can we be a little bit more logical and just say, well, actually, if there's not a really huge tide, it's not new moon or anything like that, if there actually is just going to be built up, whatever it is, a coal light in the silt, and that's potentially the problem, not something else?
At this stage, I can't answer that question. So what we've done is we've had a really unfortunate and disappointing event occur, and as part of that, we've done sampling to validate what's happening in the harbour, and that's highlighted another possible issue. So that really requires investigation to understand what that issue is before we can really say what needs to come next. What we're seeing from the sampling we've done and the investigation we've done is we don't believe it's associated with the discharge itself, but there is clearly something happening within the harbour that needs to be understood.
I appreciate my 2 cents that put towards that investigation.
Lisa, Gentleman in the middle keeps putting his hand up. And one behind him.
My name's Ken Soames, and I used to be manager of Concord Technologies. We acquired the original plant and had a good understanding of how the plant worked. I seem to recall that there was a wetlands treatment before the UV in the original plans. Did that get deleted, or is that still in function?
I probably have to check. My understanding is there was a wetland, but it's no longer in use. It's been bypassed, so no. It was there originally, near the front of by the roadside,
right.
But that aspect isn't in use. No.
My reason for asking is how effective is the UV treatment, because that has an effect on how good the UV can operate on clear water, not on cloudy water, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the nature of the water and the treated effluent and at the point it reaches the UV is really about the interaction of the UV with the water to do its job, and the cloudier the water, then yes, the less effective that can be. We monitor that through our testing just to ensure that it's working correctly, and that's not been a particular area of concern, although the suspended solids of the plant is high and it is an ongoing challenge, which is at this stage something that can't be managed within the current plant. That's why the plant has to be replaced, and those aspects don't help with the treatment. You can see, I think I showed earlier that we have tried to put some improvements in the plant since we took over the plant, but as I said, the example of last year with the high rainfall and the issues that we had, there was some really challenging times last year in the operation of the plant.
Yeah, which brings two more questions, I'm sorry. One is about the infiltration of Raglan, the water that's coming in from the non-regulated housing or roads or whatever it is. It's actually causing the peak of water on rain events. I know you've gone through and done smoke tests and things like that at various parts of the town, but we're still seeing the same problem taking place, and it's not really improving. So that's one question. The other question is the UV treatment and the treatment of the plant. How effective is that for viruses and other events? Like you've got E. coli equivalent. I can't repeat that word. But you've got E. coli, but you've also got viruses and other things that are actually in the water. That's I can't read that chart very clearly, but I haven't sort of seen that there. And I just wondered, is there investigation into that and some other treatment that would help that?
No, that's right. So the first question was essentially around infiltration. So infiltration into the network is a massive problem. So what it means is it puts additional pressure on the plant because we're effectively treating stormwater rather than actually wastewater. It is a unfortunately probably never-ending battle because there is only so much you can do to prevent that. Any low points in the network, connections from homes rather than into stormwater into the wastewater network, all these things contribute. As you said, the team over the years have done a lot of work to try and reduce that, and we'll continue doing that work. Essentially, is all I can really say, because I wish there was a solution, a single solution to the problem, but there isn't. And it's just continually what you have to do to operate the network and ensure it's doing what it's meant to be doing to the best of its capability, and trying to prevent any of those things that just shouldn't be happening.
You wouldn't be having to discharge on the incoming pipe if that was solved.
During those storm events, that's exactly right. So the more that we can remove the risk of stormwater entering the network, that means when we have those large storm events, that water won't be entering the network. Now, you'll all recall some of the storm events we had were phenomenally large and created a huge amount of standing water. So sometimes those are just exceptional challenges and the network will struggle with no matter what. But on the whole, you're exactly right. We want the network to be able to manage a storm without allowing rainwater into the network.
Yes. Can you involve the community in all of that? And basically get people to be responsible about where their connections are and that sort of thing, and actually involving the community and the council and everyone together just might solve that problem without just sitting on the council's shoulders all the time.
No, I really appreciate that, and I think it's a great suggestion. Things like the smoke testing really is to try and identify the problem, and then we have to work with the property owners around the solution on that. So we do try to work with the community as much as possible around these solutions and these issues, and we'll continue to do that. Yeah. On the second point, you talked about the effectiveness of the treatment. Well, as I said, it is an older plant, so it does have limitations. But as you can see, that the nature of the discharge at the point that we're discharging, and apologies for these three, it was just we were trying to get the sampling done really quickly when it occurred. And this anomaly was because of the mud. It was low tide, so the samplers couldn't get out there to do it. But you can see what's coming out of the treatment plant is treated effluent, but the nature of what's in it is much more controlled. But you can see the moment it hits the natural environment, there's a lot of things that can be in there that can contribute to that.
I appreciate that there is, but it must be a very challenging job to get accurate water test too.
So we work with the Water Care labs, so they come down on a regular basis to do sampling, and then they provide us the results. So they're a certified organisation to be able to do that, and it's exceptionally important that we have a clear view of what's happening within the plant itself. In this example, we're really looking wider than the plant. We're looking at what's happening in their wider environment, and that's a conversation that, as I said, we'll be progressing with the regional council to see what can be done, or it's at least to understand it.
Right. I just pointed out about that testing. We've got a world-class surfing conditions in Raglan here. It needs to be pristine, and yet we're pumping everything, petrol, whatever, on the outgoing tide as much as possible. That's all circulating around past the point.
Yeah, and I think that really calls to the last point I said about this plant has limitations. The discharge has limitations, and the community through our engagement and consultation has been very clear about their preferences. So we absolutely understand the desire of the community, and we're going through that necessary process to how do we what solutions are appropriate for that, and they are significant investments in the area. We're talking millions and millions of dollars, firstly to do the plant, and then obviously to do the discharge in the future.
I've been in Raglan for 15 years, and I've been hearing about the land disposal for 15 years. Still hasn't happened.
It's a complex process. I don't disagree. But please, we do welcome anybody to come along to those meetings and get a greater understanding of what that process is and what those preferences are. But the land discharge option has certainly been an option that's been put forward as a preference.
Thank you.
Ken, can you pass it to the gentleman behind you?
Thanks very much. Just going back onto the regional council responsibility of keeping the contractors in check and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just sort of new to the Raglan area comparatively. I certainly haven't been here as long as some of these other people here. The Water Care is an owned company by Yorkland Council, I understand. So we've got there another corporation under the Local Bodies Act 2002. We've got the Waikato Regional Council, we've got the Waikato District Council, again, all under the Local Body Act 2002, all created by that, all have to run by their constitution, etc., etc. So what we've got actually is effectively one hand, I say three hands here for these three bodies. On one hand, we've got one actually doing the work, one actually giving the contracts out for the work, and the other one being the supervisor or the policeman to make sure the work is actually done correctly. But effectively, they're all the same corporation. They're all organised underneath the same government statute. What assurance is this meeting going to get that should it come down that if the Water Care is actually treated separately as a completely different exercise or a different entity as a private organisation would be, that potentially any pecuniary charges against that organisation, which if it was a private organisation would in fact actually potentially could liquidate that company because they're unable to continue with sustainable work because of those pecuniary measurements. What is that? What assurances is we going to get that those costs are not only going to be passed on separately by way of targeted rates or absorbed into some of this other capital expenditure going forward and upgrading the new plants going forward? Why should the Raglan Community Council, why should the Raglan community have to pay for somebody else's stuff up?
It's a great question. There's a lot to that question, and as I said, at the moment we're in the investigation process with the regional council. What I can tell you is when we work with the regulator, we don't do what we do because the regulator says we have to. We do it because it's what needs to be done. So the professionals we have in the team are here to deliver water and wastewater services to the district, and that's what we do. And everything we do around the operation of the plant and the delivery of the services is around ensuring that's done correctly, environmentally sound, and that safe drinking potable water is provided to customers. Now, we work really closely with the regulator, which is the regional council, and with Taumata Arawai, the water regulator, to ensure that, and they don't make us do what we're doing, we report to them that we're delivering the services that we should. Does that mean mistakes will never happen? Clearly not, unfortunately. And do we work with, in this case, the Waikato District Council and the Auckland Council around that? As Kevin said at the start, the consent itself is held with the council, and once we get through the investigation and we understand the progression from there, then I could probably answer that in a bit more detail, but we're at that early stage of that.
Not too sure that you actually answered the question there. For argument's sake, just to give you a few numbers, if the regional council actually said this is a pretty significant event and slapped it with a $10 million fine, where is that going to be buried? Because it should not come back to the Raglan community. If that actually forces the water care into bankruptcy or liquidation, what happens then? You know, councils get their money from the communities. Who is going to actually pay? In the private sector, the shareholders pay. Who are the shareholders of the three entities that are in fact actually going to be involved in this potentially large sum? And who's going to actually end up paying?
Well, as I said, unfortunately, we don't know the outcome of that yet, so it's impossible to say where that should sit or what the outcome of that is. But if that once that investigation is completed and we understand what the regional council's approach to that will be, then we'll work really closely with them and the district council around that outcome. I appreciate your question. I just can't give you a simple answer to it at this stage.
So how clear is it going to be to the community what that is?
It shouldn't come back to us. No. We're not the professionals here. You're the professionals. It should not come back to the community in our pockets.
No, absolutely, I understand.
And how transparent are those discussions going to be? Because we get kept under the... Sorry. If we're kept in silence and it's all just, you know, how do we know it's not going to be some sort of cover-up between three arms or three separate divisions of the same organisation and end up being pushed into somewhere else, you know, and we end up still paying it by some other means?
I mean, to a certain extent, I'll probably have to look together to give a more detailed answer to that, but we're here, we're talking to you, we're being exceptionally transparent about everything that's happened, and we'll continue to do that.
And that's very, very good of you to actually give us that the time, but going down the track, there's going to be a cost. And I would, like to know where that's going to end up, and I hope it's not going to be on my resume. In either way, water or district councils.
Richard, do you want to add anything as far as how the process will work from your point of view, independent of council? Oh, it's on Patrick.
Is this something you arranged earlier on? Wayne,
sorry, Richard. Apologies.
I think we've probably said
I did have a question about the event, if I may.
Yep.
Sorry, Matt, just particular to that binary programming you talked about was a really helpful way of sort of describing that. I'm just wondering, is there any scope that prior to the known out of sequence discharges, is it possible that there were any earlier ones? And are you able to scrutinise that data to see if there have possibly been any earlier ones that otherwise were undetected?
Yeah, so the team had done that. They've looked back and so yeah, at this stage, obviously what they've done is to look forward to go to what's the solution going forward. But no, they've looked back at the data, and as I said, the 21 months it's operated exactly as it was intended to. And then once that switch occurred the first time, and again it was wonderful the community picked up on it so quickly, and then the team picked up on the second event really quickly as well. And now we've got in place activities to ensure it can't happen again without notifying us in advance.
That's helpful. Thanks very much.
Hi there. Just a question around your at that discharge point, your resource consent will probably require you to have some parameters that you're testing at that discharge point. What are the parameters? You've mentioned this E. coli related one. Are there any others that you guys are actively monitoring that could be related to environmental health, human health?
Now, I have brought along our process engineer who's going to correct me on anything I get wrong here. But we monitor it, so we've got a number of consent conditions that we have to adhere to. So one is actually just the volume. We can only discharge a certain amount of volume on any discharge ride, and across a month as well. We can only discharge a certain amount, so there is a limitation on that. Yes. Yeah, so the intercoccal testing, obviously we do. Yeah, that's it. So I'll give you what they are. We can talk through those. I'll trip myself over. But we do a number of tests as the wastewater goes through the plant and then it's discharged. And the UV itself just measures the degree of depth to which the UV goes through the treated effluent to ensure that it's effective. So there's quite a few conditions, and I should know them off my head, but we'll come back to you if that's okay. Yeah. Yeah. So as I said, it's the volume discharge, it's the intercoccal. I believe there's another one, but I can validate that. I'll come back to you with that. Just confirm it exactly.
Cool, thank you. Because I guess there are probably other parameters that you could measure that would also indicate environmental health and other aspects of human health. And I don't know if that's something that regional council would look at in terms of changing those consent conditions, if there is anything that could affect human health or environmental health other than E. coli.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of things and a lot of tests, new tests and things that are coming up on a regular basis as technology improves. One of the points that happens is when a new consent is lodged and applied for, and what you'll find is the requirements in the previous consent are well exceeded with the new consent. And that, again, that's why the level of technology that you put in the plant going forward has to meet the requirements of the current levels of testing what needs to happen. So, as I said, the nature of the new plant that we'll be looking to install delivers a significantly improved treated effluent than the current plant's even able to do. To the point that it's called permeate, but essentially looks like water. As you look at it now, it still has to have everything within it essentially removed or killed or made redundant, ensure that it can't multiply. But that's essentially where technology is going, and the consent conditions follow that. And we test for a number of things as well.
Look, my concern has always been about the stormwater. I think it's one of those problems that council is unable to solve, and it's not your fault. And I just put for your consideration that I believe our community could stop the inflows by pulling together and coming up with a plan. I believe that's possible, so that would help you. Would that not help? With the treatment being stabilized, maybe reducing the cost of the plant by millions of dollars, if tomorrow we could snap our fingers and say there's no stormwater coming into the system from any businesses or houses. It's not a question, it's just a comment that it is possible. I've seen it done in other parts of the world. You can stop the inflow 100%. And in some places, you cannot get a permit unless you have zero inflow. They will not even give you a permit. I don't think that way in New Zealand, but maybe it should. And then it would just help everyone. And it would take a big problem off of your shoulders. That's my first comment.
I appreciate that, Ryan.
My second comment is, it appears that the land discharge may not be possible. So let's say it's not possible. I would suggest you consider relocating the discharge out into the deep water. that protects all of us, our children, our grandchildren, the public. I think that's something that can be done. It's done in most places across New Zealand. I think we're one of the few that discharge it in the middle of the favourite swimming hole in our community, right in the middle. And most people are not aware that it's discharged right there on the beach. I think that's something we could all come together and figure out how to do that. And then one last thing. Yeah, I think you know this one. What I'm going to say to you. Just informing the community of when effluent is being pumped. I think we have the right to the same information that all the professionals have. And some, they told me they would not take their children or loved ones swimming at that location at any time. It is what it is. And so until we can change that and test the soils and figure out how to fix that, and maybe it can't be fixed, I would suggest putting a yellow light and a red light on the toilet block, or 2 toilet blocks. It's on the flow sensor on the pipe. So whenever the pump comes on, the sensor turns the yellow light on, and simply all that is a message to the community: hey, it's pumping. If you want to go and swim, now you can make an informed choice. But at least you know. If we have an issue where it's not pumping as designed, it's pumping on incoming tides or above the minimum solid ratings, etc., the red light comes on. It says, hey, there's a problem, stay out of the water until someone shuts the red light off. I just put that in on the table for your consideration.
No, I appreciate that, right? I think just for the kind of first statement you mentioned, the options are options. That's why they're there. We don't predetermine what the solution is. That's why we engage with the community. And I really encourage anybody who can come along online to the meeting on December the 14th to get involved and have an understanding of that. At this stage, absolutely none of the options have been removed from the consideration, and that process is what we're going through at the moment. So I can assure you that that hasn't happened to say that the land discharge isn't an option. There's a couple of things in there. Sorry. I think in regards to the light, I know we've talked about the light before. You may have seen we recently increased the size and the clarity and the visibility of the signs out by the discharge point. So that's why the toilets and the fence along that area. And that's very clear to ensure that anybody going down to that particular beach understands that there is a treated effluent there. And the other point is the one I made earlier is the plant will discharge on every outgoing tide. So that is something the community can be aware of and know that it is happening every time. The expectation of anything like this occurring again, obviously we've done everything we can do to ensure that that does not happen, and we will ensure if we ever do have a large storm event like we had in the past, generally we can manage that to inform the community before we do that, because that's about significant storms coming through and creating a large impact on the plant that we have to manage to ensure that we don't have a bigger environmental impact. So I appreciate the thoughts, and I know we've talked them through. Hey, John.
Sure, my name's John Wilson, and I was wondering whether the data comes from some national organisation like NIWA, and whether they can input it directly rather than relying on council to do it.
It is NIWA, I think, isn't it? It is NIWA that we get.
We get that data from NIWA.
Yeah, so we do get that from NIWA. The constraint is actually more around the program itself, John, than the data. The one thing I can tell you, when the new plant is installed, then if a discharge continued, because again, obviously that's part of the option, we don't know what the solution for discharge will be, then this solution wouldn't exist in the future. There's a number of other options you can have around sensors to detect the tide, so that actually the sensor tells you what the tide's doing rather than going by tide time. So at certain heights, that's when the plant discharges. That's what we have in Auckland and on the Mangere Wastewater Treatment Plant. So I think technology's moved a lot beyond us manually doing this as it was kind of designed and built in 2012, or put in place in 2005, and going forward. The only other thing I'd say to it though, it has worked fairly effectively for a very long time, and it's just the risk of the manual aspect of it going wrong is obviously too great.
Yeah, September meeting of the Waters Governance Board that they reckon sewage works wasn't meeting its resource consent. And I wonder if that's relevant to this. You've already mentioned the eco line and the suspended solids.
Yeah, so that is why the plant needs replacement. Exactly right. The plant can't continue to be compliant, certainly not with a new consent.
Because it was back in 2018 that the filter was first proposed by the district council. Watercare wasn't responsible for it at that time, but for some reason it was shelved, so now we're getting it 5 years, 6 years later.
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer there, John. These are very complicated, very expensive processes, and I'm glad that we're at the stage now where, with hopefully within the next few months we will start construction on the new plant.
And if there's difficulty reaching the memorandum of understanding with the landowner for the land-based discharge, is compulsory purchase an option?
I can't really answer that at this stage. You're part of those discussions that we're having. You've been at pretty much every session, which we really appreciate. And that's an ongoing process of negotiation and working with the parties who have land around the area that is possible for a land discharge option. Again, the purpose of securing that land is to ensure that option is a viable option as we go through all the options. And once we do that, then the next really important question as well is how much will that cost? And we've talked before about the implications on the community of costs and these type of things. And as I said before, we are talking about millions of dollars, and so we want to make sure that the decisions are the right decisions.
Usually, after the rest of the two will bring that up in the next meeting.
Absolutely. Eugenia will ask you that.
Sorry, if I can just make a comment there, because the conversations that I've been involved in have certainly been very constructive. So I feel like we are moving forward, but there's still discussions to go on. So that's my summary of where we're at.
Matt, I just wanted to do a quick reality check on something, just listening to your kōrero about the stats that you put up. What I heard was that the sampling after these two events didn't show levels of sort of bacterium that were at levels which would be dangerous to human health, except there are some spots where you picked up very high levels where you think there's some other factor at play other than the discharges. So just checking that's correct.
That's correct. That at this stage, as I said, that needs to be investigated. We don't know what the issue is. What we're saying is because those samples were days after the actual discharge itself, at this stage we don't believe there's a connection.
I've just got this name, so I think you're going to
the date. So the dates, the discharge was the 10th of the 10th. The date of the high reading was 15th of the 10th, and that was at the boat ramp and the museum, and that was a Sunday. The second event occurred on the 26th. There was a high reading on the 27th, the day after, at the boat ramp, but you can see the readings closer to the actual discharge were significantly lower. And then we have this exceptional result of 800 again on the Sunday, 3 or 4 days after the discharge itself, when all the associated kind of testing around it do not indicate, as I said, a flow of any form of contamination.
What was the location of the 800?
That's behind the museum, I believe. Yeah, so that's behind the museum.
And that information will be available as well. So
Absolutely.
make that all available for everyone as well.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
That's Patrick. It's Patrick here.
Just looking at your slides, you've put some alarms in place. I'm an engineer, sorry. You put some alarms in place. They're sticky plasters on the system to try and catch things going wrong, which is cool. You've indicated that there's other means of measuring and reacting to tides. We've got another 18 months at least, and I know there's been plenty of times in the past where we've had these issues. Is there any plans to make any changes to stop that happening in the near future?
Just on that one statement, there really hasn't been a lot of events, so this is certainly not unplanned like these ones. We did have the events due to the really high weather, and we communicated that to the community. I came out to the local board meetings to discuss that when that occurred as well, because obviously we were disappointed about that as well, but that was something beyond our control due to the weather events. This unfortunately wasn't that. This was, as I said earlier on, human error. So the alarms themselves are to ensure that it can't happen. We catch it before it occurs. And the other activity that we're doing is we've got, as I said earlier, around 18 months to 24 months of new plant to be in place. That'll be defined. And what we're doing in the interim is significantly increase validation of everything. So we'll be monitoring the programming. We'll be, as I said, we'll be working with both Dennis and Lisa to communicate how that would work and the results of that, so that the community can have confidence that those validations are in place and that they're working until that new plant comes into play. And at that point, if the current discharge is still in place, that will continue, but the nature of the treated effluent will be significantly improved as well.
Okay, just one last thing. You've created functional descriptions from the code, and now you're validating the code against the functional descriptions. Is there anybody overseeing that to make sure that it's actually right? Correct?
Yeah. And it seems to happen with any new plant that we put in place. We put in functional descriptions that go through change management. We do all the checks and balances. We test, we retest, and then we validate things are working correctly. As I said, these programs and the PLC was tested. We understood how it worked, and it worked perfectly for 21 months. And then due to the data error, not the programming was actually correct. The system believed it was doing the right thing, but because the data that it was programmed under was wrong, the underlying data was incorrect, that's why it did the wrong thing. And so what we're now ensuring is we don't need to change the program because it's doing what it's meant to do, and it has done it successfully for a long time. We just have to ensure, which is what we're doing, that underlying data is correct, and that's what we're doing now.
Okay, so there's no plans to put any more sensors in around tides or tide levels or?
I'll just say the investigation's not finished yet. We don't, this, as you can see, this happened 2 weeks ago, and we're still working on everything to understand what we need to do. We're really confident, the team is confident the triggers we've put in place now will avoid a future event, but if we need to change things to give us a higher level of confidence, then we'll still be looking at that.
Patricia Paul, a couple of quick ones. Would there be value in doing more testing further up the harbour? And how confident are you, given the likelihood of increased significant weather events in the future, that the new plant's going to be able to handle it?
Great questions. Yeah, so in regards to the testing within the harbour, that really sits more within the realms of the regional council and what they do. As I said, after the investigation of this event, we'll be working really closely with the man on some of the results that we saw from the sampling we did. And I'm sorry, the second question was?
The likelihood of more significant weather events in the future, how confident are you that the new plant is going to be able to deal with that?
So two parts. I think we're all unfortunately confident there are going to be significant weather events in the future, and we have to manage for that. And the plants are designed to weather that. Now, one of the advantages of the new plant, it sounds like a strange thing to say, but it's probably more aligned to a water treatment plant than what you perceive a wastewater treatment plant to be by the technology. But the ponds that are already in place will remain, and the purpose of them going forward will be retention to manage storm events, so that we have that redundancy with the ponds that we have in place to ensure that if just too much volume is coming through, and we've talked about the I&I, the infiltrate and the leakage and the infiltration into the network, that we can manage that without having to do this.
Sorry, just a quick one. When this plant first was installed, it actually did have a tide sensor, and that was changed to a time-based program shortly after that, as it was considered to be unreliable. But through telemetry, you could put one down at the wharf or something like that, and telemetry back to the plant, and that gives you an extra safeguard that it's pumping at the right time of tide. There's another part to this, which is this harbour with a storm pumps through that harbour entrance like crazy, and the tides are not like they are on the charts. You can find that there's a mid tide and suddenly there's a big surge up the harbour, and you really need that sensor in there to actually validate your times. It needs a mixture of both to actually be successful.
Yeah, I think it's a really good call out, and there's a couple of points here. Is one, no technology is infallible, so having multiple checks and balances to ensure it's operating as it should be. The other aspect that no tide is infallible, and they do vary, but and daylight savings is another aspect to that. But ideally, that's why we don't discharge on the turn of the tides. That's why we allow the tide time to make sure it's between half an hour and an hour, which is quite significant. And as you said, the water races through there. It's I know we've talked about people swimming there. I certainly wouldn't recommend anybody swim down there when the tide's turning. But so I absolutely agree with the point that we want to have multiple checks and balances in place to ensure the plant's doing the right thing.
Kia ora, I'm Tash. Just a quick question about what was talked about earlier with those high levels that have been found. I know it's been asked a few times. Exactly how will we find out the results of that? I know the Regional Council have left, but I'm interested to find out those results. How will they be made available?
The results, we'll make them available to the District Council, and I'm sure, looking at John, there'll be a method of communicating that online.
So I think your question is, I think your question is, how will they be investigated? Is that your real question? To determine why they were so high?
Yes, I'm interested in that as well. Yeah, definitely. Like you say, it looks like it's something larger than just what's been happening. So, yeah, we all are interested in that. Like my neighbour actually was speaking about the kids too, we seem to have that's something we would do in play. So, yeah, but yes, interested in the investigation and what's discovered, but also just curious to know how it'll be communicated to us.
John, that'll be on the website.
Yeah, as soon as we get the results of why it was high.
Yeah, so they'll be available on the Waikato District Council website.
And we'll make
if we can,
available as well. So myself and Dennis and the community board, and I just really encourage people to attend monthly online fee. They are really, really helpful. And you can also, we have the expertise in the room that we have here with some of our staff, like Stephen Howard and Keith, who are regulars on those free things, so they will be able to give us that information as well. Because Dennis and I can give it to you and the community board, but we are not experts in it. So we will definitely be sharing that information as soon as we get it.
what we can do, if you leave your details down, get it to you directly.
Amazing. Thank you.
Angeline speaking. Question: is there any a treatment that removes hormones?
I'm looking at our process engineer here now. Is that a question we can answer here, or we may have to take away?
No, happy for you to find out.
I can answer part of it. So
You can probably take it away. Yeah. So I know you've engaged with Richard and the team a lot, so we can come back to you with kind of more detail around that if you'd like, just to make sure that we give you a really comprehensive answer, if that's okay, rather than just throwing it around.
Hello, my name's Vita. I've just got a couple quick questions. Why don't you test further into the harbour? Because it looks like you test around where the new area is going to be, but why don't you test further into the harbour?
No, it's a great question. So the reason we don't test in the harbour is because we can't really control anything beyond the plant. So what we're testing is the last point that it leaves the plant, which is where we do the UV testing, and we test directly after that. And that essentially tells us the nature of the treated effluent at the point it leaves. The issue is once it goes into the natural environment, as we all know, there's a lot of things in the natural environment. It's a species, so we're talking dogs, we're talking birds, we're talking all sorts of things that can then have an impact on that, which unfortunately we can't control, or we can certainly not directly control via the plant. So the nature of the testing that we do is really validating that the plant's doing what it's meant to do. The regional council tends to be more involved with the wider environmental aspects of it, and I know there is testing. I don't know the specifics of it, but I know that they put the sample results and testing results online, so it's certainly something to have a look into on the regional council website. And again, we can probably come back with more detail once we can talk to them. But from the district council's perspective, it's really, is the plant working as it should? Is the treated effluent leaving that plant at the level that it should be? But once it reaches in the natural environment, that's really beyond the levels of control we have.
Okay, cool. Another one was why are you not doing the lights idea? Why the signs might be better than the lights? For me, it just seemed like signs are more missable, and like having the lights might be just much more clear.
We have had a look at it. So one is it's at the harbour entrance. So having lights blinking in the harbour entrance can be a bit confusing to boaties. So that was one of the concerns we had. The other one is people coming along don't know what the light means. So the locals probably would, which would be great. But anybody else who's new to the area or doesn't understand the area is going to go, what's that light about? And the signs that we've put up, if you haven't seen them, please go and have a look at them. We've got a what's it called? The code QR code. Sorry, I do know. I actually created the darn thing. But so we put a QR code on there which links to the website, so you can go there and get more information about why the signs are there. The signs we increased them by about 3 times size-wise, and we clarified the detail working with Ra and a few others just to make sure that we felt they were really clear and that they're at every entry point to that area of the beach. So absolutely appreciate the question, and that's why we haven't gone down the light aspect, because we think there's good and bads to that, whereas the sign that should be quite detailed. I'm happy to take feedback on that though, if people don't think that's sufficient or they don't think that detailed enough.
And one last thing, well, do the signs change if there has been like too much waste or going out on the incoming tide to like directly let people know that it's changed? Yeah,
so one of the way the community sees is we put out a large number of signs around access points to the beach when something like this occurs. Again, as I said, normally this would only be planned due to high weather events. This was a really disappointing event that occurred. But what the team do is we immediately get out and put signs. Now that's not about don't swim, because as you can see from the results, and I know they're a little bit hard to see, but from the levels, so 140 is the point at which generally it's defined as still safe to swim and without any concerns. It's actually 280 where you start getting concerned about that. What's coming out of the plant is 1.6. What we're seeing in the area around that beach area is up to, I think I mentioned that we've never had more than 31 come out of that plant in the last 2 years. So in comparison to 280, at which point you're saying you shouldn't be swimming, we're just a long way away from that. And so what it's generally saying is that we've not met our consent conditions, or we have met them, because during storm events we are permitted to discharge because we just can't cope with the volume. But what we do is make sure we're really transparent with the community to say, look, we don't recommend collecting shellfish. The likelihood of any health issues coming from it is exceptionally low, but it's about transparency. It's about making sure the community is aware that we have discharged on an incoming tide. So we really try to make sure, and we also work with the council around putting things on the website so the community is really aware from the Facebook page and everything else that it's happened, what it means, and obviously the fact that we don't want to do it, and we've done it for a reason, except for this disappointing event.
Thank you, and thanks so much for your time. I feel like there's a real fear in the community that when we talk about this unplanned discharge, people have this feeling that it's basically raw sewage. So I want to get it straight from the horse's mouth, that looking at the structure of the ponds and everything you're talking about and the screening and the process it goes through, there's no way that pond number 1, that's way back with poo and paper in it, the actual solids and paper, is making it to the sea through that treatment plant.
100%. So
it just seems to be
that's what this line item here is saying. We know it's really disappointed. We're really disappointed it occurred. But the one thing that's really important to understand, at no point has untreated waste entered the harbour.
Thank you. Hi, Megan. So just to go back to that 3 years of data, that tidal data is input to your program, what level of automation are you doing to check that data? I mean, I know you're getting lots of people to look at it, but some port is inputting that data, and are you using some modern automated technology to review the data before it's input?
Yeah, so one of the really good questions is, do you have qualified people programming that we were asked? And so without going into details of the individuals, I've got 12, certainly the qualifications, I've got 12 and 14 years worth of experience. The organisations are very qualified programming organisations. One of them in particular is who we use in Auckland as well for all the programming in Auckland. So this isn't a matter of qualifications, it's a matter of human error and a mistake, just essentially a missing of something that shouldn't have been missed. And then the validation that we do on top of that is to actually make sure that the programming that's being entered in the system is what we ask it to be. Because it is that simple. It's not when you look at the programming itself is completely difficult to understand. And I think I showed Dennis earlier the simplified version we get for our checks, which is what's being produced from the system. I'm happy to show anybody if you'd like to see it. But when you actually look at the programming itself, you wouldn't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. But what we do is we validate the outputs and make sure those outputs are what we requested when we were saying that should work. And that's what the team are doing. And I've, as an example, the reason I'm throwing down is because I always validated it myself as well.
And so is that validation technology being continually updated? Because technology is moving very fast. So like you said, came out 2015. Is the validation technology for the data the most advanced validation possible?
The validation at the moment is eyes and checks. So the simple answer is with the programming and the systems we have at the moment, there isn't a better way of doing it. What we've gone back to the programmers for is a way to get the data out in such a format that we can do better, less risk checks and balances. So that's why we're having 3 people look at it, because you know 1101010 you can get mixed up. And so we're triple checking that at the moment until we get a better method.
As a sailor, I can check the tide and the data on any port anywhere in the world at any time to go in and out of. So it seems unreasonable to think that you're not using a technology that double checks against human error.
So the data that we're pulling from NIWA is the data associated with times, and what we're doing is we validate that data ourselves, and so the team validate that prior to giving it to the programmers, and then with the programmers we validate what they enter in the system, and then we validate what's in the system. So I appreciate your point. The data itself isn't so much the test, the challenge, it's the how do we put a validation over top of it, and the technology that currently is within the plant doesn't really tailor to that, and that's why we're looking to replace it all when the new plant's in place.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a bit of context in relation to some people raise the issues of fines and accountability. So I'm a councillor with Waikato District Council, and not in Raglan, but I've spent a bit of time out here. Just on Ra's point about the stormwater ingress, when in the last big rains in January, the sewer manhole on Wallace Street there that goes into the pumping station, that lid was lifting off the whole manhole base because the amount of stormwater coming into that was enough to lift that manhole lid. So the stormwater ingress just in that part of town is massive, and so when I was looking at that, I was thinking, okay, this, if you're worried about more sewage, it will be in a big flood event that maybe takes out the ponds. That's the risk there. But just in terms of accountability and finding people, it is 3 parties that are all related. So in the end, it's all going to come from our pocket. The district's got 9 stormwater wastewater treatment plants. Most of them are non-compliant. I won't talk about Raglan because it's in tender, but Tikawata, we just spent $40 million there. Huntley is looking at 100 million plus, potentially 200 million. We cannot afford this out of rates. That's the whole free water things was to address this, and that's gone now. So we're not sure what's going to replace that. So, and what I'm trying to say is we're all in this together. It's our waste. If you live here, these guys are trying to manage it. It's not an easy job. We're investing big money in new technology, but it's still going to be a problem, and it's not an easy fix. So I just think before you start talking about penalties and fining people, how do we work together? And minimising stormwater would be a really good place to start as a local community. But it's heartening to hear some of that conversation. But yeah, it's a difficult one. And I just wanted to sort of say, let's look at the big picture of it. Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Hello. I feel like I'm hearing two different messages from you. A minute ago you said you would never recommend anyone swim at the change of the tide, but at the same time you're saying that the numbers or the testing numbers are far, far, far away from unsafe to swim, so it doesn't have to me.
No, sorry, just to really clarify, I wouldn't swim there because of the current, not the water. I'm sure you've all seen the rate that water goes through that entry to the harbour. It's not safe to be swimming there. It's nothing to do with the water itself. I wouldn't have anybody swim there. You see the kite surfers and everybody else out there. They're brave and they can do what they do, but anybody who's swimming in that channel, in my opinion, taking their life in their hands, which is not advisable. But the nature of the water, no concerns at all.
Okay, well that makes sense. I've been in touch with Tom Shelton, I don't know if he's here tonight, but I still want to understand if the swimming is not an issue, why are there signs, don't swim in this, don't collect shellfish, if there's an issue with swimming?
Yeah, so the signs don't say don't swim, they simply say don't collect shellfish. And again, that's an advisory that we put out, which is, as I said, is much about transparency of what's happened as it is. Now, the risk, and I've spoken to a number of people, and I know we sent the response to you today. It's about making sure that the community is aware of what's happened. And if they choose to collect shellfish, that's their choice, and that's fine. But we want them to do it in an informed way. And as I said, the likelihood that there's any risk from that is exceptionally low, but you need to be informed.
So hi, I just wanted to hammer on once again on that point that we've raised a few times of what are the parameters that you're actually testing for, and if we get that information, because I come from a place where people dump all sorts of stuff that they shouldn't in the water supply, and probably most of it's not your fault, like people are dumping heavy metals in the water if they're dumping hormones. We live in an area that's really heavy dairy farming, and there's all sorts of stuff that affects the environment, like nitrogen, that creates algae overgrowth. And it's not really your fault, but we're the ones that have been swimming there. And it would be good to know what is in that water, even if you don't have the capacity to treat it. If you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So nitrogen is another thing we teach. So sorry, it's just when you're up here and you're trying to remember everything. Sometimes you forget things, but so I'm happy to come back and obviously the consents itself dictate that information, so it defines what we have to do and how we do it. But I'm happy to, again, if we can take details, I'm happy to take you through the sampling that we do and the testing that we do of the effluent. Sure.
Just to clarify something he's talking about, the media release that went out from the council talked about the community being urged to avoid swimming and collecting shellfish for the next 3 days till Sunday the 29th. So there was swimming and collecting shellfish. So can you clarify what your advice has been after the first series of spills around swimming and collecting, and your advice after the second one, and what's the current advice?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, what we're doing is trying to ensure that the community is informed about what's happening and the activities that they do in the area. So the decision to, as I said, the signs themselves don't say don't swim, they simply say don't collect. But we work with the council's comms team around making sure that the community is aware that this has happened, and if people choose not to swim, then that's absolutely fine, and choose not to collect. So we're happy to take feedback from the community on that as well, of what you would like us to tell you. If it's simply to say this has happened, hopefully after today you understand the implications of it. You also understand the levels at which you would normally be recommended not to swim, and that these discharges generally don't reach that level or even get anywhere near it, certainly in association with the discharge. But happy to take feedback from the community on how you want us to communicate with you, recognising that we do also have to work with the regional council and their expectations and their requirements around notifications as well.
Just want to double back on the topic of the high readings on the 15th and 27th. There leeward side of the harbour, but probably were personally familiar with the water body that runs through there, and that there is a body of water that runs right up to the very roadside edge of the treatment plant. Is there any concern that there could be some leak or anything that you're not expecting? Or
No. I understand the question, and it's a really valid question. So what we're referring to is the fact that the stream passes right by the entrance to the harbour, passes right by here, and so. I think the simple answer is no. I think we do need to understand what's happening there, and we'll work with the regional council. But what we're referring to is this stream that's passing in front of it. But as you can see, the ponds and the holding of areas of the water, which in most cases are lined as well, are a significant distance away from that.
It would be pretty easy to do a couple of tests to check.
We did a life test. Right? Sorry, the life test we did as part of the study. Using all the life we found.
Yeah. So we work with the community and Chris and others around, what is the environment looking like and what's the life around the area looking like. So, as I said, this is really disappointing, and if there's additional assessments we need to do just to give the community confidence, we're happy to work with the regional council, district council on that.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. I guess a couple of points that come in there for me is one is on the stormwater inflows. Council did do an exercise a few years ago looking at all the old houses in Raglan and that sort of thing. And I know a lot of older houses in Raglan, the spoutings from the stormwater off your roof went straight into the sewage system. Now, I don't know whether that's been fully addressed, but we've got the infrastructure chairman here today, so I think Eugene is probably something that we need to revisit throughout Raglan, probably some of the other areas too, particularly for the older houses. Newer houses, they are definitely separated. I don't think we've got an issue with the newer houses. The other thing is the high levels around the water at the museum and treatment, when I saw those this afternoon. Because years ago there used to be a pipe that came out just beside the museum that was big enough for us kids to run up there and catch eels. And it actually went a long way up Stewart Street. And I'd be intrigued and everyone in this catchment area would have had septic tanks. So I just wonder how much leaching we have from those sort of systems into those sort of areas, because there is still a drain that comes out of that area, and you get a stormwater event, and that leaching's come through, it's just going to be flushed out. So, there's a few things like that that are probably well worth investigating. Angelina, I don't know if you remember that pipe, but it certainly was a big pipe. So those are a couple of things that, we certainly need as a community board, we will pick up on. I'd just like to say thank you all for coming out tonight. We appreciate the interest in the event and that sort of thing. I'm quite positive on the work that Watercare, Matthew, and the community that are involved are doing, looking forward to the new wastewater plant and that sort of thing, and we certainly make a difference. And as Matthew said, there's a few issues around the land base, but from a community board point of view, land base is still our preferred option for disposal field. And certainly Watercare are pushing down that way. So thank you all for coming out. Thanks to the guys from Watercare and ladies, and also from council. Thanks for making yourselves available at short notice for the meeting. It's much appreciated. And for those that want to dial into the hui going forward, the Watercare meetings or Teams meetings that we have, if you get a hold of Lisa, myself, or yourself, Chris, one of us can make sure that you get an invite to that meeting. And as far as the validation, Matthew, I think I'm going to try and push that to one of the controls engineers as a member of the community board and see if we can go opt in to look at that. He's saying no at the moment, Chris, but we'll have to work on it. So I'd just like to ask you to be close with that.
Yara tēnei kai kiro i konei ki te takahika i unei I tā koutou mana whenua tana meki. Oe no, tēnei tangi. Look, I just want to echo the words from Matt and from on behalf of the executive of Waikato. And as mentioned, and I'm part of the executive, and we do take this seriously. Angeline, mō koutou, tā koutou hāpori, nā hapu nā iwi kai koni. Oe no tērā. No e kei te mea tiki ao toko rua nei, e whakarite o tō tātou nei wi, thank you very much for the week, but also thank you to all the community here of Raglan, especially for your partner. Ko te mea nui i a mātou o Wokia, kia whakarono ki o koutou nei kō. So it's important for us that we are here and that we actually hear what you're saying. No reira, kia ora koutou. Nā tō tātou atu o katoa, hei manaki hei taki ao te tō, o te ao. May all our gods take care of us by day, by night, by night, by day. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. O ie, ui e. Tāi te, kia ora koutou.